I think technically, over, David, help me out, was it
2004.
2004 it started. Okay, so you could say from there, or it also started in 2007. I think that's when I started actively filming him. There is another film that made with David called The Ballad of Oddfellow, which features Draco as an actor.
Obviously, sadly, Draco died, during the period you were filming. How long were you intending to film? Was it open-ended? Do you think, I'm just going to film and then make sense of it at some later date? Or
well, I think it's clear from the film that I had no idea what I was doing anyway. Really. I mean, it's sort of, I knew that there was something in Draco that I wanted to understand, and any kind of narrative consider. I went to pitch the film at the Sheffield Documentary Festival, which it showed up this year, and it was a profoundly depressing experience, because I was in an environment where there were a lot of people with genuine enthusiasm for documentary films, but the questions were: could he be weirder? Could he play with his nipples more? Could he be fatter? Could he have weird, maybe he could have more tattoos or something? It was always this kind of like prurient desire for something more extreme than the subtlety of a relationship between one human being and another. But at the same time, I don't blame anybody for not buying it on that basis. And it was an unfortunate collection of circumstances that allowed me financially to finish the film.
It's interesting because, as you said before you started, it's not really a biographical film as such, because the information that we know about it is very, very spare. At the beginning, just a few photographs of him as a young boy, a little bit of information about when he was a dancer, and that presumably was a conscious decision to put the audience in a similar mindset, so it's all about the present, it's not about the past.
I live completely in the now.
Yes.
And that's I think there are so many ways. Mim told me a story about walking down the street with Draco wearing just a kimono. Just a kimono, and not particularly tightly tied up kimono either.
No, it was a family day, a Sunday afternoon on Madeira Drive. There were lots of people about and it was windy.
But as several people said tonight, he's in a sense innocent in terms of that. And what I loved about him and continue to love about him when I re-see him in the film is that he just forces you to accept a slightly broader understanding of what it is to be human. So Draco is completely in the now, and even though he as you see in the film, he goes on, he talks about working with Darling and so on, but really he forced you to be in the same place that he was, and that was right there. I mean, it's very, very intense going to visit him. I don't know if that was the case for you, Mark.
Yeah, it always was intense. I suppose I went with lots of history, family history, so I kind of knew what I was going to see and knew what I was going to find, needed to put the time aside, and yeah, every time it was different. He was a bit like a, I mean, I'd heard all those stories a million times, but they were still as important to him as as the first time. There's a comedic element a number of times. He tells the woman at the bus stop about how he was picked out. Whether that was ever true or not, I don't know. But who cares? It was his truth, and he loved it. He loved it all.
So with you, Mark, I mean, obviously, Tony, you were going around filming. It was a sort of fresh experience from every time. But what about with you, Mark? Could he remember you just as a child, or could he remember you from like a year ago?
He never had any problems remembering me.
Right.
So I think with family, it just goes deeper than anything else. Yeah. You're my surrogate brother now. There was for me and for us as a family, it was really touching when Drac calls Toby his friend, because there's a real, for the first however many dozen, 100, visits, he doesn't remember you, and then he does, and that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, he always remembered me, always, knew who I was, so it was like a kiss, and, and despite many invitations to tug hard on his nipples, I never did.
You resisted.
Oh man, when you're blood family, it's just not right, is
He did call you his sexy nephew.
Actually, is there anybody in the audience that has
tugged on his nipples?
So, nipples aside, Lynn, how would you characterise your relationship with him? Because you knew him over quite a long time as well, didn't you, yourself?
I probably would have met Draco at late 80s, about 88.
Yeah.
So, how would I characterise? Well, I just knew him over a long period of time, and lived in the same street as me for quite a long time. When he had the second car crash, I got the call to go to the hospital then.
Wow.
So, and just lots of significant events.
I mean, he does seem to characterise a very a very strong character, obviously. And when I first came to Brighton, I remember seeing him in the streets, and I just thought, yeah, this is the place I want to be. Because people like that are just accepting, and it's very, it's such a strong character. It really characterises a lot of, I think, what Brighton means to people. I was going to say to you, too, one of the things we talked about the other day was about, you were saying it was being screened somewhere, and you overheard somebody saying, one of the first rules of documentary making is never fall in love with your subject. And you clearly did. You did. I mean, I know you didn't tell them, but you clearly fell in love with it to a degree, didn't you? But it's like falling in love with somebody who can't remember you. So that makes it different again, doesn't it?
Well, I think everyone's fallen in love with someone that they found it very difficult to be in love with them, and someone who perhaps appeared to be unaware of their existence. So there was a mix of genuine affection for Draco and a direct desire to look after him, to be a positive influence on him. And as I also told you the other day, Graham, whilst towards the end of Draco's life, I was also having in a way, a similar relationship with my sister, who was having very, very painful struggle with type 1 diabetes, end-stage type 1 diabetes, if you will. So I was having to negotiate that thing, and for me, what the film is about how you as a human being negotiate the cost of caring for another human being, and how you negotiate between being what you hope is a positive influence in their life and also allowing them to be absolutely who they are. And clearly that's what most of the film is about, is that particular struggle. Yeah. And in both instances, I intervened to where it felt appropriate, possibly too far, but then also hopefully step back and achieve some sort of acceptance that person is in charge of what they perceive to be their destiny, and that's their business, not mine.
Yeah. Of course, with his mental state, it's very difficult to know from day to day how much he is in control, I suppose. I mean, one of the things I was thinking is that if somebody told me that within a year's time I'd be developing that as a mental issue, I'd be terrified, and I'd think, well, I'm going to spend my life, worried, bewildered and so on. But with Draco, you get the feeling that really wasn't the case. And also that he seemed, people said he was happier after the accident. I mean, do you think that was the case? Did he see?
He was happier. He found his way. And watching the film for the second time, I just thought, what more could he have wanted? There wasn't anything that he felt he was without.
Yeah.
So he was happy.
Before he lived in the council flat, he was living in a really cool flat, wasn't he, on Applewood Street. Elegant building, bay window, view of the sea, high ceilings, loved it, everything on the doorstep. And from our point of view, that was a much better place for him. You know, that was a really cool place to go, to be. He had all his friends around him. And then he had the accident, and then we had to get him rehoused. So from our point of view, family and friends, we weren't excited about him being offered this, you know, this one-bedroom council flat in the not-so-nice part of Cape Town. But I was saying to Toby earlier on, what amazed, and I remember moving him in that weekend, and it was all really difficult. But then coming back to see him about a week or two later, thinking, crikey, you know, what's he going to be like having phoned him? And said, no, everything's fine, tout va bien. And walking in, and he had it all arranged. I mean, it wasn't quite as busy as it was towards the end, but he had already made it home, and he was perfectly happy there. So, you know, there was a real lesson there, because we project our vision of what should be okay and what should be acceptable, what should be, you know, happy. And he, you know, taught us all a lesson, I think.
Well, he created his own world around him.
He did.
I mean, that flat is like an amazing sort of gay art installation there, isn't it? I mean, it is a very cock-heavy film. As you just mentioned, has that caused any problems in terms of getting a certificate?
The certificate is me coming and introducing the film and warning people about the number of cocks they're about to see currently. So I hope it's unrated and uncut. It is. I mean, this is the thing. When I showed it first to my mum, and I said, "This cock nipple thing. Are you alright with that?" And she just said, "It's him." You know, and that's the thing, is that there's that. It's what I was kind of intimating at the beginning, that's Draco. And to try and cut out the cocks, would have been disingenuous, and it wouldn't have been him, and hopefully people can see past that. You know. But yes, it is cock-heavy. You're right to recognise that. But I think it's also important to recognise that like when I was going there with David, looking over Drac's shoulder, my particular passion with regard to art history, just what my academic background is in outsider art, and I was like, this is like a British outsider thing, and we don't really have that tradition in England quite so much. And then when you realise that Drac is trained as an interior designer, you realise that what you're looking at is a work of outsider interior design, which is pretty special.
Yeah, that's a very specialist area.
And I should say, if there are any multi-millionaires in the audience, I know there's at least one, that's with Tom Sargent here and the LGBT archiving group, Our Story, all the very beautifully archived material we see at the beginning and the end of the film, we have in the lockup, and at some point we're hoping to reconfigure that back to the Bacon studio to give people an opportunity to experience what it was like in that environment. And I do hope that you all got there, as well as the sort of the difficulty of being in that environment, just how beautiful it was as well, because it was when the sun was shining through the windows, that place was just beautiful.
Yeah, there's some sequence in there. This is like a magical grotto. It really is. Yeah.
And it crosses the boundary between the real and the imaginary, or the remembered, or what is meant to be remembered beautifully. It was a really special, but also a difficult place to be.
Yeah, I can imagine. And did you? I mean, over the period of years that you were going, was there a lot of changes in the look of the place? Or was he constantly adding to it, or was it fixed?
There was Martin Conway, who's credited at the end of the film, the cognitive psychology consultant. Every film needs one. Said that he thought it had kind of stopped, but I didn't really get that impression. I think when Beau, the gentleman that he alludes to in there, who seemed to have sent Drac quite a lot of sort of certainly Arabic, if not Islamic, fruitiness, which is usual side bar. When he died, that it may have changed things. I think it did change things very significantly. But I always felt like it was a constantly moving environment. But it was very interesting once we cleared, with the help of Don Close and Merrill Fraser's in the council, we had Drax flat for 3 months after he died in order to archive it properly and also film it in a way that did it justice. Once it was cleared, you saw marked on the carpet Drax's area of operation, and you could see how much it had shrunk. Which is really, it's a shot that I always feel is missing from the film. I couldn't find a place to put it in and explain what it was, but you could see how his universe had shrunk as he got older, but also the La Fauteuse, that's wrong, had prevented him from moving around, and that was the battle I was fighting.
Okay, I wonder if anybody's got any questions that they'd like to ask for
Gentleman over there in spectacles seems to have something else to say.
Yes, if you can speak up and I'll try and repeat it.
Toby, it was useful, thank you.
Well, thank you, David. That tends to
my question is, you kept some. There's a backstory, one of many backstories of Draco's life, which is his time in prison and the origin of his name and his drug dealing and his connection with the film Savage Grace. Was it a conscious decision to keep that out of the film, or just wasn't room for it?
There were lots of. There came a point where I decided that the story that I was going to tell in that film was the story of my relationship with Draco, and every time Jim Scott, the reasonably talented editor, and I, the extremely talented editor, and whilst we were making the film, there's so much. There are so many different stories, and I know there are lots of people in the audience tonight who have their own stories with Drac. But with regard to making the film, and the audience requires a particular kind of narrative and a particular kind of entertainment. And our experience in editing it was when we had those stories, that they were just stories in that context, and it's very hard to bring those things to life in a way that works within this particular context. That was my experience. But as you know better than almost anyone, Dave, that there are so many stories with Draco, associated with Draco, and so many that are almost impossible to verify now as well. So unfortunately, we had to keep a lot of those things out, and every time the film shows, I'm tempted to say, well, the second half of the first act goes a bit slowly because you're trying to get this contextual information out. But if you give a tantalising story like his work with Jerry Malanga, Warhol's filmmaker, or his work with Derek Jarman, or that you want to go off down those places, but then also when he's associated with bigger places like his, as you told me, his relationship with the Rolling Stones, to whom he might have sold drugs if they'd ever taken any, that you bring those people in and Draco becomes less important. And my dominant experience with Draco was my relationship with him, and that's ultimately what felt most honest to show. But hopefully you'll be coming to the after show party, David, and you're in a much better position to tell those stories about Draco than I am. He's there, everyone.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hello there, Terry. I'd just first say how nice it is to see a director actually wearing a beret. That's
my job. Nothing to do with any hair loss.
I found it. I mean, obviously, I came across Draco, tangentially in my life in Brighton over the years. And what I like about the film is the fact that it is kind of tantalising that way. It is living with only in the present. You haven't, but there is this almost, fascinating hinterland to the man that you're desperate to know about. But of course, he isn't in that, and the filmmaker isn't in that. So I think that was the right decision to do it in the now. But I can see there being an appetite with this film to know more of that. Are there plans that you have a lot of the material goods of his life? Is there kind of a tie-in or some kind of further investment? Because he's one of those characters who is iconic, but more than iconic, an instrumental thread through culture in the second half of the 20th century. And it might be a fascinating thing to have a look at him and his involvement in various things. Does that make sense?
It sort of does, yes.
Yeah.
Well, David, I don't know how much you know about film finance, but I'm guessing my credit card bill's much more than I do.
Yeah.
And so there are lots of things that I would like to do, and I feel an obligation to do on this with regards to Draco's story. Primary thing at this current point is to get the film just to zero financially, and that would be fine. And then hopefully, yes, we can create a situation where people get to know more about him through in three dimensions, through the archive, and then that would give more opportunity to find. But the problem is that when you introduce somebody like Salvador Dali into someone else's life story, that person sucks all the atmosphere out of the place. And I don't know about you, but perhaps you have a scandalous past. But what is important, I think, to all of us is not so much our past, but it is our now. And I think that cinema offers me a good opportunity to demonstrate what that's like.
Yeah.
For
it's the perfect medium for it. I'm just saying that what it does spark is an interest in the rest.
Yes.
And
There's a whole lot more, but it requires a temporal and financial investment that at the moment I don't have the luxury to do, to be honest with you.
I feel like Kickstarter was bounded or something like that. Thank you.
Cheers.
I think one of the messages that I felt anyway from the film is that you can have this amazing life, you can be with Warhol, Set and John and all that, but in the end what matters is your soul and who you are, and he clearly felt that, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yeah, he did. I mean, that guy over there just sparked off a whole bunch of other stuff, but which I won't go into now. But I remember, he got arrested for having a tiny little bit of hash on him once. He actually got through customs with a couple of kilos around his waist. He got through, but he got busted for having a tiny little joint in a hotel room, I think, in Spain, and he got incarcerated. And the way he got through that was by writing notes on a little bit of paper, and he and some friends on the outside would sort of pass each other notes. I'm sure he was on acid at the same time, which helped to pass the time. But there are episodes like that he told me about, and plenty of others beside. What was the question? I'm really sorry.
I've forgotten that. Any more questions?
There's a hand up over there.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to go off on a...
You're going to go off on a...
I don't think the mic's on, but we can hear you anyway, actually.
I'm going to go off on this slight tangent. I'm a cognitive neuropsychologist, and I do research with people with amnesia. And one of the things that I get very angry about is when people the fact that these people don't get enough support because brain damage isn't very well understood. So I've worked with people who are in kind of similar situations to Draco in terms of not getting the support they need, because anyone can see that because he can't remember to phone the doctor and do those things. He's in that constant loop. So the first thing was that kind of anger for these patients that I felt. And the question was, did you talk to any neuropsychologists who might be working with him or see him at any point?
Do you know Dr. Martin Conway?
I do.
But so we
He's not a clinician.
what's that?
He's not a clinician.
No, I mean my understanding. Martin Conway came to see Draco and spent a significant amount of time with him, which was not a process Draco appeared to enjoy. at all. And my understanding, I think Mark and Mim are in a better position to talk about this perhaps than me, but clearly Draco is in the best, hopefully, position, would have been in the best position to talk about it, was that Draco was not really interested in any kind of clinical engagement. Clearly there's a sort of very, if you will, folksy approach that I adopted with regard to, in inverted commas, his care. But with regard to any significant medical intervention, I received the clear impression, but it's a subjective impression, that Drac was not interested in that, and from his point of view, la vie a sa propre validité, mais on doit faire un effort. I could never really work out how to say that. And trust absolute unconditional were sufficient for his care.
Yeah, but you did care. That's the point. Because that bit of footage we taken to A&E, brilliant bit of, you know, I mean, I don't know how many years of medical training that guy had to go through to say, oh, yeah, you've got an infection.
But I think you make a very valid point. But at the same time, short of having people sort of with a key coming into his flat, I don't know how the level of care that you appear to be suggesting could be affected. And so, if that was the responsibility of his general practitioner or some broader outreach program with regard to Sussex hospitals, I don't know. I visited Drac as often as I was able to and didn't experience any kind of outreach. So I don't know with regard to your question, to be honest with you. But also, one of the things that fascinated me about Drac was his clear and present and constantly repeating determination to be who he was in the moment and live and face the void. You know, a void that repeats for him and refreshes far more quickly than it does for the rest of us. With this ultimate courage and this ultimate acceptance. So it's clearly an indirect answer to your question, but I think he was doing the best he could. We were doing the best he could. Institutionally, perhaps there could have been more that could have been done, but I don't know what it was. But I did get the clear and constantly repeated and refreshed sense that he was not interested in that kind of engagement with any medical professional. I don't know, Mim, do you have anything?
Yeah, I agree that what more could have been done for him? He wouldn't have wanted to be in an institution. He had only a certain tolerance level of people. He'd get what he'd say, wiped out. He'd very quickly get wiped out by a company of people.
Just liking this a lot.
Yes. Yeah, he was being very tolerant. So I can't see what more could have been done for him. I mean, he was being the best he could be for himself.
I'm not criticising him or the work that he did. I'm just making a comment about the fact that happens to a lot of patients with brain damage and they get ignored by the system. And people often misunderstand what neuropsychologists do, because we know that there are things that even people like Draco can remember to do, even though they don't realise they do. And we harness those intact abilities that they're not aware of to teach them strategies so that they can do some of the things that Tony you wanted him to do, so that he remembers to do them even though he doesn't. I worked with a patient who couldn't remember me 90 seconds after I left the room. We taught her how to use a small palm top to remember to take her medication, and each time we showed it to her, we'd say, have you ever seen this before? No, never. Have you learned how to use it? No, never. Okay, just carry review the crossword, and then as soon as the palm top started ringing, she knew exactly what to do. So the conscious awareness isn't there, but there is an ability to learn, and I can see from his personality, he probably wouldn't have been able to engage with the parents learning the strategy. But it was just the point I was just making was that it highlights that there are other people like him who might not have quite the full personality that he did, who are missing out on quite a lot of help, which is basic, but it can change their life, and that their carers at least somewhat.
Yeah, that seems to make an awful lot of sense.
It really does. I think just watching that film from what little I know Draco, what you can see within him is because perhaps of his artistic sensibility and the way he was used to expressing himself, he perhaps had outlets that some other people wouldn't have who'd experienced brain damage, and so he was cushioning himself perhaps from the sort of scary aspects of the mental disorder through that. I mean, maybe I'm projecting it, maybe I'm sort of...
Drac spent a lot of time typing his typewriter. That would be something he would do every day in order to read something. If he read something, he wouldn't immediately be able to understand it. So he'd be at the typewriter that you gave him, one of those old-fashioned, manual typewriters, as a way of being able to engage with what it was he was reading. And then another thing I really want to say about Draco is about his aesthetic. He had such a strong aesthetic. When he used his typewriter, black ink, red ink, some stenciling, the kind of design and aesthetic was something that he did every day. It was a really big part of his life that kept him in the present as well, and engaged and active.
He's a wellspring of creativity. You can just see the constant appearance to his flat, to everything about it is pure expression, isn't it? I know he's part of being an exhibitionist, but he's a very specific type of exhibitionist, isn't he?
But he never spoke about being an artist from the inside out. I mean, he would talk in terms of the theatre of life and being a performer and an exhibitionist and so on, but he was clearly, he created a work of art, not only out of his living space, but also out of that period of his life. I mean, that was really what's interesting, or what was interesting. I'm really moved by what you said with regard to the possibility of there being more help that you can give someone in Drac's situation. I mean, I think that I did get a strong sense that when I were engaged in that department, I was being pushed away because of the living in the moment thing. I was respectful of that, but the possibility of because I think all of us had this sense of his lack of memory was unreliable. That was the thing. We were like, oh, I don't remember that, but you do remember this, and it seems that there was more research than certainly we were aware of that could actually define that. Any more questions?
Yeah.
You were obviously worried about his health while you were making the film. It seemed to me there was only one way this film was going to end, in a sort of inevitability about it. And you must have almost expected at some point to turn up on the doorstep and find he was dead. And that, in a way, so you lose the star of your film, you lose your friend, but it gives you the opportunity to then finish the film. So that must have been a strange feeling. So I was kind of wondering how that was when you kind of go...
Shitty?
Yeah.
Really shitty. And I also lost my sister that year, so it was doubly shitty. She left me some money that allowed me to finish that film. Clearly, when someone's life ends, you're forced to think about what that life meant. And because they're not around anymore, you're also forced to think about how their life meant something to you. And that fundamentally is the process that goes on in the film. Up until that point, a friend of mine is leaving for America very soon, and I went to a leaving party last night and quoted, just the first time ever, Joni Mitchell. You don't know what you've got till it's gone, and unfortunately that's all too often the case, and I think there are, certainly, I have a lot of regrets about my things that I could have done with Draco, should have done with Draco, and so on, and unfortunately, yes, it's fucking shitty that in order to finish the film, or realise that there was a film there, and there was a life there, and there was something that I needed to understand the meaning of, it required Draco's death, and that's didn't require Draco's death, and it seems implicit what I just said, but yes, at that point then you go, fuck, you know, what does my relationship with this person mean, and how do I make sense of it? And I can't say it's fortunate that I had that evidence of what it meant, but in a way, at least I did, and that's why I record so much that I do, because I want to have evidence of what's past. I want to put a stamp in time and at least know the flag, at least know that I was there. But it's never going to be enough.
We did talk about it, didn't we? Toby, you know, and I would speak on the phone. You know, we talk about his health and how he was, you know, even worse, and he put weight on, and you know, he'd been to see the doctor and just stuff, and my mum's visit. And it was always very poignant for her because she lives in New Zealand. She comes over about once every 5 or 6 years, so she knew really that was going to be the last time, because she knew, you know, she knew that he'd been in pain for 10 years. So we did talk about it, which helped, and we knew that it was going to happen at some stage. We just didn't know when, we didn't know what the circumstances would be, but, you know, as we said in the film, just so grateful that it happened at home and that he didn't need, you know, any intervention or to be taken out of his home, because you saw how really tense it all got. So, and I think, you know, one of the few good things, I remember saying to Toby after, you know, after being mourning after the news, I said, well, the good news is you'll be able to finish the film. That was about the only good thing I could think of at the time, but yeah, no, you're very well. No, but I said it, you didn't say it, I said it.
Okay, I think we've probably got time for one more question. Perhaps somebody from the back? We've been a bit front heavy.
Come on the back. We've got one there, but come on the back. Come on, I'm sure you got some in there. Middle. We'll get to you later. That's something that, I mean, I wanted to share with you what it was like for me to have a relationship with Draco. The thing that I felt frustrated, partly because of my ineptitude as a filmmaker, but partly because of the limitations as a medium, was what it was like to be in that space. Tom Sargent and I spent a long time in that space, gently, not pulling it apart sounds too violent, so bringing it into, putting it into two dimensions almost in a way, and it will be when it will happen, and I have it all in a lockup in Camptown waiting for that day when it will happen. I have to say though, and I don't mean this in any kind of glib way, you're never going to smell. Because I mean, it seems like I'm making a joke, but the parts of it smell revolting, if I'm honest, but it's like, it was such, wasn't it? I mean, it was such a rich perfume.
That's
not
what I whispered. I just whispered to Mark about recreating the smell. It was remarkable. Yeah, pungent.
It was like the olfactory equivalent of a novel. You know, you really got so much when you went in there, and that's unfortunately, I don't think anything that we could ever fully repeat. But it was so.
A lot of it was incense. It wasn't just cat piss and old food. So it was.
So much of it was him as well, though, wasn't it? It really was. It was, I think, in a conversation with David, where the phrase "an invitation into his home" is an invitation into his mind. And when I was making the film, there were two films that I had in mind. One of which was Sherman's March by Ross McKelvey, which ostensibly is about General Sherman's March through the South, but it's really about In Search for Love. So a very intimate film about one thing, that's actually about another, and then that film, Fantastic Voyage, which my dad showed me, which is, you know, that where the people, the scientists get miniaturized to go inside, I think it's the president's heart, brain. And I just love that idea of going inside somebody to understand what they were. Clearly it doesn't look anything like that film, but that was those two things were sort of guiding us. We did have another question. Sorry, Graham.
Yes. Anybody at the back?
Graham, when you wanted to do this Q&A, what was going through your...
I don't know, full of regret now.
I was just wondering, editorially, when it comes to decisions start at the end.
Yes.
What was the reason?
That was to take away the sting of death.
Was that to let the audience...
It was like, if you were paying attention, it was to tell you that that something really horrible was on its way, which of course is the point of art, isn't it? And life. But yeah, that's Jim and I, and Cat Mansell, one of the producers on the film, had a long conversation about that. But it was basically that the sequence where we discovered that Draco is dead, I think is a work of poetry, and I'm not taking any credit for that because I think that all goes to Jim Scott, who could stand up again. We all know where he is anyway. There he is. Narratively, and it's disgusting to talk about narrative in the context of another human being's life, particularly when they're dead, I think. But that said, I'm a documentary maker, so I'll make that leap. But it's narratively, a lot of the film is taking you to that point where you realise what we've lost when Draco dies. But the point of putting Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, as we referred to them at the beginning, is to let you know what is coming, but not to let you know too clearly. But yes, it's a prefiguring of death, memento mori in high visibility. The forces of darkness come in high visibility. Remember one thing from tonight, please remember that.
Okay, well I think we should probably wrap it up there, but thank you for producing such an amazing and inspiring film. It genuinely is. I think it gives you a lot of hope for humanity, I think, in a way.
Well, that's right. Draco would be so chuffed to see the Duke of York full of people in his beloved hometown of Brighton, so thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.